It's very easy when you're sitting here in London to get absorbed by a prevailing narrative, which is quite black and white, really. Moscow bad, Kiev good. Life in its complications is always more complicated than that.
Yeah, absolutely. This story appeared above the fold on the front page of the Times on Monday. This picture of this 79-year-old Ukrainian granny saying, "I will die. I will fight to protect my homeland. I will fight to protect my children and my city." A similar images from the same exercise, a civilian training exercise, appeared very prominently covers of the Guardian, the Financial Times, the Independent, all the UK papers, and then here in the United States, where I'm based, it was covered by ABC. NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel spoke to the grandmother, who told him, your mother would do the same thing. And of course, it's a very media-ready set of images, right? You have this steely-eyed, silver-haired grandmother, looking down the barrel of a gun at Vladimir Putin. What they didn't mention, the only mention of this was in ABC, but it was only in passing, was the fact that that training exercise was held by something called the Special Detachment Regiment Azov, or more popularly known as the Azov Battalion, which our Federal Bureau of Investigation, our FBI, describes as a group with Nazi ideology, Nazi symbolism. In fact, its insignia, their insignia is an SS-inspired insignia. Now, I'm not, to be clear, suggesting that all the Ukrainians getting ready to potentially defend their country against the Russian incursion are Nazis or white supremacists. That's not the point. It's just the fact that our media is so hungry, especially Anglo-American media, is so hungry for these simplistic narratives. Grandmas and attractive young women and children gearing up to defend their country against Russian revanchism, against Russian aggression. And it's never quite so simple, as you said. And so all I'm asking for, I think what people on both sides of the Atlantic in Britain and the United States should ask for, is not this kind of airbrushed, narrative-driven news, just complexity, the world in all its complexity.
Yeah,
it's not to condemn all Ukraine as Nazi.
No, amen to that. I mean, I was there in Kiev in 2014. I remember being struck by some of the shady characters on the Maidan Square, and even in the hotel where we were staying, which was a big hotel, and there were people in guns, hoods with guns in the foyer. They'd taken over the place. It was a really lawless, anarchic time, but it was characterized by the fact that there were people there who were, there was revolution fermenting all around you. Some were from the left, some were from the right, but depicting it as just one was daft. I mean, as you say, it's more complicated than that. Why have we got to that position, Sohrab? Why are we less able to reflect the true diversity of a story back at people? Are we part of the problem? Is what's been seen as sort of news channels, news outlets that take a certain position? That's an allegation sometimes laid against us. You'll be familiar with the argument in the States. Are we part of the problem?
Yeah, I do think there is this clubby mentality among the mainstream media. I used to work for the Wall Street Journal in London for the European edition, and I remember this was a very instructive moment for me. I remember when the migrant crisis happened, the European migrant crisis, 2015, 2016, and I went to cover it. I went and lived in a safe house of the migrants because I speak Persian in Istanbul. They were mainly Afghan migrants. I followed them through the Greek Isles and through the Balkans. And the more time I spent with them, the more it shattered my impressions of it shattered what the rest of the media was saying about this incident. Every person I would speak to would say, "I'm an engineer." What did you do in Syria? Well, I'm an engineering student. I always joke, if Syria had engineering students, it wouldn't be Syria.
I've absolutely got to stop you. We are of one mind on this. I found the experience exactly the same, and it turned out to be a totally seminal experience for me as well. I grew really tired of my colleagues in mainstream media only interviewing the woman uncovered hair with a degree in biomedicine from Damascus University. Sure, they existed. But they weren't every other person. And all the while, because actually the camera, particularly when it's live, never lies. And in the distance, the middle distance, you would see the shadier characters who didn't want to talk to you, couldn't speak English. Why were they there? I mean, I'm not saying, many of them were there to do what I'd be doing, improve the quality of their life, seek economic opportunity. Some of them may have been fresh out of prison. Some of them may have been radical Islamists. We didn't know. It was complicated. There were several different stories, but we got just the one.
Yep, exactly right. So there have been too many instances of this kind, and they've made me especially alert to, let's say, elite consensus. Elite consensus, going back maybe to the Iraq War. Remember, the Iraq War wasn't just something that was concocted by, the Bush administration. It had wide support from The Economist, from Fareed Zakaria, these kind of very mainstream left of center figures, from The Atlantic, from The New Yorker. Everyone suddenly was gearing up. The Arab Spring, the reception of the Arab Spring as just this unmitigated good, young Democrats toppling crusty old autocracies. Well, of course, it created these vast ungoverned spaces across the Middle East and North Africa. And then COVID, oh my goodness, all the sort of monomania, the monolithic coverage of how we treat COVID, even as the narrative changes, and it seems like yesterday's orthodoxy is today's heterodoxy. Today's orthodoxy then is enforced against everyone who held to the earlier view or what have you. We have to be willing to call these things out, you and I as journalists and others, hopefully, because we can't just stumble into these kinds of mindless coverage. And Ukraine and Russia is another example unfolding before our eyes.